Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My audio quality should be better than the last video because my headphones should be off now that they are off. So I think that was the cause of the audio quality problem last time. But anyway, this is my 2026 hurricane season landfall forecast. If you have not watched my 2026 official hurricane season forecast, I would strongly recommend either watching this video and then going to watch that one because that's where I have all my numbers for the amount of named storms and hurricanes just in general, or pause this, go watch that, and then come back. I would strongly recommend. But without further ado, let's get started. So again, if you've already watched my other video, some of the stuff that in this video is going to be in the other video, the precipitation and some of the ENSO things. Same if you go watch the other one and then come back to this one, there's going to be some of them. But anyway, without further ado, let's look at this. So look in the top left, the Nino 3.4 index. That is our El Nino Southern Oscillation, where we determine whether it's El Nino, La Nina, or a neutral phase. So we're at negative 0.411. So we have just entered a neutral ENSO phase. So we will see how that progresses as we go into the hurricane season, though it is expected that we will see a neutral El Nino during the hurricane season, especially in El Nino as we go in the mid to later season. In the bottom left, the MDR, so that's the region between Africa and South America. We actually were above average in terms of temperature anomalies, but it seems like we were going into slightly below average or neutral area there. So the main development region is still warming because obviously we're going towards spring and summer, but it might not be as warm as previous hurricane seasons. The Gulf, call it whatever you want. We have dipped a bit, but we have been staying above average in terms of sea surface temperatures in the Gulf, and the same with the Caribbean. So that will be interesting as we go into the hurricane season, though. Just because we have warm sea surface temperatures does not mean, we're going to get hurricanes and major hurricanes or really strong systems or a ton of systems. That's not what that means. I'll touch on that in a bit. Also, y'all, I am trying to speak more clearly than I have in previous videos. I have been working on that, so hopefully in this video it is working. Anyway, so first off, let's look at the precipitation anomalies, which kind of show like tracks. So on the left, canned SIPs for the peak season. August, September, and October. The whole hurricane season is important, but this is just a peak season. And also, these seasonal models have been showing basically the same precipitation anomalies for every month of the hurricane seasons. That's usually what happens. So I'm only showing one of them here, but go check out the website on the screen if you want to go see more. But basically, the canned SIP from the left tend to show extreme precipitation anomalies. They tend to show the same thing every year, but they do show high precipitation values for the Caribbean, most of the MDR, not really the central MDR, and they're showing fish storms due to those high precipitation anomalies in the open Atlantic and some in the Gulf. Now, nothing really valuable there because honestly, that is the only model that really seems to show above average precipitation for the entire Atlantic. So the canned SIPs model tends to be good with things such as the Bermuda high and such. Other models tend to weaken it too much, but in terms of precipitation, I'm not really going with the canned SIPs here, though I'm leaning much more towards the CFS, which does show high precipitation anomalies in the eastern Gulf and near the southeast United States coast, near Bermuda, and also just in the open Atlantic that is north of the main development region. And below average precipitation pretty much everywhere else, like in the Caribbean and near the Yucatan. Well, not really near the Yucatan. Not near the Yucatan, but in the Caribbean and most of the Caribbean and the main development region. And that really seems like what we're going to be seeing this year. A lot of more northern tracks, and by northern, I just mean the northern open Atlantic and also just the eastern Gulf and the southeast coast. So I don't mean northern as in New Jersey or in the subtropics. No, I just mean north of the main development region and north of most of the Caribbean. It kind of seems like what we could be seeing this year. Now, something that goes a little more along with the CFS model, but definitely not the canned SIPs, is the European model. And we can see just the extreme extreme values of high precipitation in the Eastern Pacific and the Western Pacific, especially the Western Pacific. So that could definitely mean extremely active seasons for them, or at least the Western Pacific. But look at the Atlantic, y'all. Very below average precipitation for the main development region and especially the Caribbean. But we have higher precipitation values for the open Atlantic. And for the rest of this video, y'all, when I say open Atlantic, I mean above the main development region, which is, again, above the region between Africa and into the Caribbean and South America. So, but above average precipitation values, like I was saying, are present in the eastern Gulf of, so like north of Cuba to Florida and like going westward to like say maybe Alabama. That is what I mean by eastern Gulf. So around the Florida Gulf Coast and the southeastern Gulf Coast on the Atlantic side. So Florida up to the Carolinas, the Bahamas, and even places like Bermuda and the open Atlantic, like I said, that's where we could really be seeing the activity in terms of tracks due to that above average precipitation. And the reason, y'all, I was saying that above average sea surface temperatures does not mean, oh, tons of hurricanes, is because it's being contrasted by these precipitation anomalies. So we could just be seeing not a lot of lows or trade winds, which I touch on in the actual hurricane season forecast, which you should check out after this video. It could prevent warm sea surface temperatures from even taking place, or like extremely warm, like some of the models showed, including and that is strengthened by the fact that we could be going into an El Nino. So in terms of like where these storms are going to go, this goes up to September. Now we don't really have much values yet due to the fact that it's only March, so these graphics haven't been available really till this month, but we do have some things for the Atlantic. So we have a usual expected value for the Carolinas. I do disagree with that. I do think we'll be having above normal there, but we do see reduced expected value in parts of the main development region. It's just a little speck, but that definitely shows that in those areas we could be seeing below average. Now, the fact that it even shows a value for the Carolinas, I do think that means it could definitely have enhanced activity, the fact that it's detecting something. But then again, it's not showing above average, so that also could just not be the case at all. But next month in April, definitely we could be seeing more colors on this map. But in the white, it's just like, it doesn't really detect anything yet. But this is just a new graphic I wanted to show. Analogs, let's look at. So this is the analog chart I showed in my preliminary hurricane season forecast. So these years are 1982, 1994, 1997, 2006, and 2015. Mainly, I would say 2006 and 1994. And we definitely do see landfall hotspots as shown in this map, tons by North and South Carolina, whether it's going right off the coast or making landfall. And I would say that even though it's not technically a landfall, when it skims the coast, it's technically not a landfall, or when it goes right off the coast, I'm still including it in this video because it still affects land. You can still get hurricane impacts, tropical storm impacts. It just depends on the strength of the system, but that is grouped in because they can give the same impacts as landfalls. But anyway, going on a rant here, sorry. But definitely tons of systems near the Carolinas and even going into the Florida Big Bend and Panhandle, and that can be shown by the white and red colors in those areas in the Florida Panhandle and the Carolinas. It does show much below average for the Florida Big Bend. I do not know why it shows that. I think it's because a lot of these years have barely any landfalls. But I do not think that's going to be the case for this year, because while there are some of these years that are showing very little landfalls, there's about, like, I would say about 4 of these still show a notable amount of landfalls, which is why even with the below average season, I do think we could be seeing above normal landfalls in some areas, which I'll get to in a second. But I don't know why the colors are doing that. But yeah, for the Florida Panhandle and into the Big Bend and the Carolinas, definitely could be some major, well, not major, but like more notable areas to watch is what I was trying to say there. Sorry. And then even in the southern Florida, while it's not shown on this map, but I will get to southern Florida in a second when we look at other analogs that are not on this map. And then, of course, Bermuda, we see eastern Cuba, a little bit Haiti, and the eastern Bahamas. Now, some years that these years aren't any less than the ones I just showed of analogs. I mean, they aren't any less of analogs, but we see 2018. So these at 2018, I'm not expecting this year to be as active as 2018, especially not in the amount of hurricanes or major hurricanes. But in terms of tracks, it's pretty similar. I do not expect the MDR to be that active, but still the Caribbean was pretty inactive. Most systems went out. There was a lot of open Atlantic systems. We had a Carolina landfall, and we did have stuff in the Panhandle and near southern Florida. So that goes along with that Panhandle / Big Bend hotspot and southern Florida. In 1976, I do think the storm tracks for this year are kind of odd. So like all the circles they do and and how they're tropical depressions, and they form and they die just as quick as they formed. Like some of these tropical depressions, they form and then die a day or two later. I don't think we're going to see stuff like that because those weird storm tracks, so obviously they aren't very common. And in terms of the tropical depressions being very short-lived and stuff, even with more inactive seasons like 2025, pretty much all the tropical depressions became tropical storms. So like short-lived things and weak systems like that, I do not expect. But in terms of landfalls and areas they were, this year seems very similar. Again, the Caribbean was pretty dead, and the MDR was honestly pretty inactive too, because those are where most of the tropical system, the warm water, those are where most of the warm waters are. And even then, the strongest systems were in the open Atlantic north of the main development region. We have many systems right off the coast of the Carolinas and making landfall in the Carolinas, and we have systems near the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend and near southern Florida. So that is definitely something we're going to watch in terms of areas that could get landfalls. And by landfalls, in this case, I mean tropical storm and above, so 34 miles an hour and above. But yeah, 34 knots, 39 miles an hour and above. But yeah, the weird tropical depressions and the weird trackside and those short-lived systems, I don't really expect much of those. By short-lived, again, I just mean like it forms and then dies a day later, to clear that up. And the reason I'm saying that so much is in a lot of these older analogs, we can see that most of the systems, like I think I'll use the next analog as an example. 1972, this year had like 19 tropical depressions and 7 tropical storms. A lot of the depressions were really short-lived and they were weak. That stuff doesn't really happen anymore with the warmer sea surface temperatures. So yeah. But anyway, 1972, again, we have that Big Bend and Florida analog, and a Florida Panhandle analog. So definitely a hurricane or tropical storm definitely could go through that area. The Caribbean and main development region, especially the Caribbean, were pretty dead. We had many out-to-sea systems, and the Carolinas just had tons of stuff as well, and even parts of the Bahamas. So with that, let's look at the CAN-SIPS Bermuda High showing a slightly stronger Bermuda High. Slightly around average to slightly weaker Bermuda High. So systems I don't expect will be going towards like Texas or anything. But I do, CFS Bermuda High. So yeah, average to slightly weaker Bermuda High for the peak season. So I don't expect systems are going to be going like to Texas. But yeah, so this is just kind of like an overview. These arrows do not show the full tracks of the systems. It just shows like parts of the tracks, like the Bermuda Highs and ridges effects on the system. So yeah, we can have some fish storms in the open Atlantic, like the arrow on the right. Systems that get into the Caribbean could go towards eastern Cuba, Haiti, and the eastern Bahamas, and maybe even Jamaica. That arrow going towards the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend, like we saw in those analogs. And I also expect a southern Florida, somewhat of a southern Florida risk. And then, of course, the Carolinas, many tracks like that. I don't expect this is not a track forecast. I'm not expecting like 3 systems to go right near the Carolinas. I mean, it's possible, but these are just track examples, like an overview. And, of course, the colors show the landfall hotspots in order, which we'll get to right now. So the 2026 United States landfall hotspots official. This was in my preliminary forecast, but it was not my official one. This is my official one, at least my first one. And then we'll get to non-United States landfall hotspots in a second. And by landfall, I mean landfall this is not proper terminology. Landfall means when the eye or the center of the storm crosses over land. I mean when it goes over land, or if it gets close enough to land to where it gives just as many impacts, or very near to that. Like if a hurricane passes right next to North Carolina or South Carolina, but doesn't make landfall, but it still gives tropical storm or hurricane impacts, then that is kind of considered in that, even though that's not technically a landfall. Same with the non-United States stuff. But so the inland extent of the colors does not mean anything. And yeah, sorry for going on a rant, but number 1 is the Carolinas, shown in the pink. Number 2 is the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend, also with high analog support. So those are very similar in ranking, but that's still number 2. And then number 3, Southern Florida in yellow. So yeah, all these areas need to be watching, especially the Carolinas and the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend. And again, the inland extent of the colors does not mean anything. For non-United States hotspots, and I know the entire Bahamas is circled here, and they are at risk, again, the entire Bahamas, as in technically anywhere, but for the Bahamas, I want to note that the risk is specifically the eastern Bahamas. So, eastern Cuba, and also Jamaica, even though it's not in the circle, Haiti, the eastern Bahamas, like I just said, and Bermuda especially, and especially like Bermuda, that wouldn't be, like it's very hard to get a system to actually make landfall in Bermuda, but systems go near it. But yeah. And also, this is an overview. Stay tuned for a bonus in a second. But the 2026 hurricane season landfall forecast overview. I expect 3 to 4 tropical storm landfalls. 2 of the 3 of those I expect in the U.S. 1 to 2 hurricane landfalls, or again, coming right near the area, even if it doesn't officially make landfall. That is included in these numbers, like I said earlier. But yeah, 0 to 1 are going to be in the U.S. and 0 to 1 major hurricanes. I do not expect any major hurricane landfalls this year in the U.S., but that could change in the next update. So these are average to slightly above average numbers. Those hotspots I said are at an above average risk of being impacted or having landfalls. So that's why these numbers are driven up, but pretty much everywhere else I expect to be below average. Again, these numbers do include like a system, even if it doesn't make landfall, if it significantly impacts an area. Not proper terminology, but yeah. Though, very well, 3 to 4 tropical storms could actually make landfall. Again, I can't tell you the specific tracks. Anyway, sorry for ranting, but yeah, I expect weaker tropical systems. Again, all tropical systems are serious, though. By weaker, I just mean not like a Category 3. Maybe like a tropical storm, not like doesn't quite get to 74 miles an hour. Again, quantity over quality, like I said in the last hurricane season video that I posted earlier today. Activity hotspots, for the United States, the coastal Carolinas. By coastal Carolinas, it doesn't mean only the coast is being affected. Inland South Carolina can be affected. I just mean, like, obviously, if you're by Gatlinburg, I mean, I know Gatlinburg is in Tennessee, but if you're, like, near the Appalachian Mountains, obviously it doesn't include you. Because, like, and then the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend, and then southern Florida. Those areas, I don't specify the coast, because pretty much the entire state is near the coast. That's not the case with the Carolinas. So it doesn't mean if you're not in like the coastal county, you're not going to get affected. No, that's not at all what that means. It just means if you're near like right in the Appalachian Mountains or whatever, you're not going to get affected. Probably, you never know. But anyway, sorry. For non-United States areas, eastern Cuba, the Haiti, the eastern Bahamas, and Bermuda. And my next landfall forecast update will come right after or go along with my next official hurricane season update, which will be on either Saturday, April 5th, 2026 or Saturday, April 12th, 2026. And real quick, this is the West landfall hotspots thing. So my first landfall hotspots came out in my preliminary forecast in late February. This released on March 2nd. And yeah, they are still updating this. They're going to add like specific dates and stuff. They do that in the coming weeks, so I will make sure to include that in either post or my next video. But yeah, the Florida Panhandle and Big Bend and the coastal Carolinas. But yeah, y'all, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for future videos. I will definitely try to post other weather videos before the hurricane season updates, especially on severe weather. I have actually been reading up on severe weather because, in my opinion, it's the most advanced form of weather forecasting, and I really want to learn more before I make more forecasts on that. And then, of course, during the hurricane season, I'll be giving hurricane updates. Maybe if there's another winter storm. I was learning about winter storms over the winter. So, yeah, I've been trying to do better with that stuff. But anyway, hope y'all enjoyed. Make sure to go watch my other hurricane season video if you haven't. And, yeah, have a great night. Y'all, bye.